Welcome to Data Points. I'm your host, Ryan Mummert, and I'm also the president of Pinpoint, Guam, where we lead with data. Today, we're meeting with Brent Wiese. He's a local architect with GHD, formerly RIM Architects, and he's going to give us some insight about sustainable architecture on Guam and alternative building methods, and a lot of cool stuff about the industry that you may not have already known. Stay tuned. All right, Brent, welcome. Thanks for joining us here today.
Sure.
I always like to start off with just asking you to introduce yourself to our audience a little bit about your professional background.
Sure. So I'm an architect. I first moved to Guam in 1995. Left for a few years and came back. But so licensed in California first, and then licensed here in the CNMI. Very lucky. I worked all through college doing architecture, landscape architecture, and I've never had a problem finding a job. It's always, and it was kind of an amazing thing because at that time the market wasn't good and it was hard to find jobs, but it was just out of word of mouth. Hey, I know this guy. Talk to him. He's like, yeah, we'll take you. And so, and I've worked with some really great architects. So I've been blessed in a way, and very, very lucky. So I've enjoyed doing architecture. I love creating great spaces. I'm a problem solver, so to me, if it's at the heart of the puzzle, the more the satisfaction. And it's been a great career.
Nice. So 1995, to set the stage, that was kind of a time where there was a little bit of a dip, right? I think like into the late 90s, heading into the early 2000s. So was there a ton of activity at the time?
Well, in Guam, the dip wasn't too bad because there was a lot of retail construction at the time.
Right.
And so when I came here, my first project were 2 schools.
Okay.
And for Governor Guam. And it was federally funded projects. So we did Enron Elementary and Upi Elementary. So
okay.
And that was a lot of fun.
Nice.
And then after that, I got into, our office was doing a lot of work for duty-free shoppers. So we were doing DFS. So then I took over the project under construction and managed the Tumon Bay Gallery expansion, and then from the beginning to end, the Saipan Gallery expansion. So the Hard Rock Cafe here, the Planet Hollywood here. Yeah, it was fun work. It was a lot of work.
Well, that's really neat because like what they say is when you first get out of school, you don't know anything, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone just makes fun of you when you're new in the industry like that, and then you learn, you earn your, you make your bones, I guess, on your first job. So that's kind of cool to have those projects under your belt.
Well, and I was lucky because I was working all through college too. So I was getting a great education in design and drafting, in those days, it was all hand-drawn.
Okay.
And so it was kind of a craftsmanship, your drawings. The drawings themselves were kind of works of art as well, even though they're just construction documents.
Right.
And so so I had all that even before I graduated. And so it put me in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I know. I've always been like amazed as a kid at the draftsman's table, and just like architect sketches and stuff. And that's some of the nuance you miss now. Is just that sketch, that pencil to paper feel, right?
Oh, definitely.
And the lines, right, of the renderings when you actually see the artist renderings that are like, it's amazing, right?
Well, and you, as part of our education, you're taught to sketch to find solutions. So you kind of sketch it out and say, no, that doesn't work, and try it again, and we have tracing paper. We just lay it over the top and do it again, do it again, And so, that's how we solve problems is by drawing. And so, fast forward, it's a whole new generation. A lot of the kids today, they don't know any of that. They do it all on the computer. And so we'll be sitting there trying to solve a problem. I said, okay, well, just sketch out how you do that. And I get this look of terror going, no, don't make me sketch. Can I do it on the computer? No, I want you to sketch out and show me how you want to do it. So it's changed.
Right on. So now you're the Mr. Miyagi of the, the architecture world.
I'm the old man in the corner.
But the wisdom is there in the approach, right? Like you said, it's the problem solving aspect of it, which is great. And so, one of the things that we have a problem with here is sustainability. We live in a place where there's not a lot of natural resources, and one of the problems is, and that kind of lends into what we're doing in terms of attainable housing, right? That's kind of the big mission for everybody right
Yeah.
now. We have this whole generation of renters that if we don't solve these problems, how are they going to be homeowners? And that's one of the things that I see you as trying to solve in sustainability. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, Guam has, it's really two issues. You have sustainability and then you have resilience. And so a lot of work done here is more focused on resilience. So if there's an earthquake, there's a typhoon, fire, whatever, it's how quickly can we get back to work?
Okay.
You know, how quickly can the building be occupied and be functional? And so that's been a bigger part of the focus here. Sustainability, it's a nice thing to do, but it's, and looking at the definition of sustainability, it's a nice thing to do, but sometimes we can't afford it here.
Yes.
And so, a lot of people do the LEED certification, which is a very expensive process, just doing the process, not counting what you did to the building to get there. Okay. And so what we've worked with our clients is say, well, let's not do the certification, but let's focus on getting more bang for your buck. So let's focus on a better mechanical system. Most buildings, your power is for your cooling, it's for your air conditioning. Homes, office buildings, most of your dollars are going into air conditioning. So let's focus on the air conditioning and let's make it, we don't need a Cadillac, but let's don't buy a Yugo, for those who know what Yugo is. We just dated ourselves.
I know what a Yugo is, yes.
But let's find somewhere in the middle where you may invest more in the beginning and cost more during construction, but then it's much more efficient, and you're going to be saving money year after year because it's a better system.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that approach is kind of what you're looking at in terms of sustainability locally.
Yes,
right? And that's like the
biggest bang for the buck.
Right, and it says like making sure you capitalize your assets at the fullest and save as much on the outlay as you can, right?
Yeah.
On the maintenance side. Okay.
Well, and cost.
Right.
It costs so much less to run. If you're using way less power, and so we did a building for a local company, and basically they had the same footprint as they did before, but we designed it in such a way that they had capacity for 5 to 10 year expansion in that same space.
Okay.
Where before they didn't have any more room.
Neat.
So we're very efficient on how the layout was. And then we looked at the air conditioning and we talked them into, let's do this. And they were all ears. And within a year, I'm getting emails going, this is awesome. We've already paid for the extra costs in savings in our power bill. And so thrilled.
Nice.
Just thrilled.
So where do you get your inspiration for, like, how do you keep abreast of like the changes and like the methodologies? Like, how do you get inspired and bring that to the table?
We're always looking, I have roots to go back to the States. I'm traveling to Asia. I have friends in the industry all over the place, and they're always, hey, check this out, And so, and we've done some fun things in California in construction. And I think some of those ideas have come out here and have not been successful. But so it's insulated walls that are preformed insulation. You pour the concrete inside, that kind of stuff. So you just keep your ears open. You're reading the trade magazines, you're looking at the news, you're seeing what's going on. We had a group doing hay bale construction, and talk about great insulation. Well, it's great, but then, there's a problem with the rats.
Termites eating all the hay.
There's holes in my wall now, So it's fun to, but it's a learning process.
Right. Yeah.
People try to succeed. This is a really tough market because so many people have been burned by carpetbaggers. Where they come in, we got a great idea, let's do this, and they do it, and the first typhoon comes through and the thing falls down, and they're like, I got nothing.
Right. And so that's one of the things I wanted to speak to as well, is because there have been historically a ton of rapid building solutions and affordable housing solutions that have been presented that have just never caught on. And part of that is just misinformation. Like, in 1992, Typhoon Roy hit in my school. at Father Duenas, we lost like the quad, right? And so they replaced it with these like 5 Lockwood classrooms that are still sitting there to this day, right? And those have been through some of the worst typhoons we've ever had historically, and they're still standing just fine. And I've sold Lockwood houses here too that have been here since the 90s. There's Ravda houses. But when you talk about Ravda, everyone's like, hey, you get into the penetration, right? The foam goes bad, right? Yeah. Even like some of the prefab solutions, or even steel, right? If you talk to a structural engineer, they'll say, "Oh, it's great, it'll withstand the wind, but if something penetrates, then the whole thing's going to implode. What about that?" Yeah. So, what do you say to that? Like, what do you say as to some of the solutions that have been tried and haven't been successful because of the information on the market?
It actually goes deeper than that. So, there's not a lot of metal construction, other than the metal building warehouses that you see, Butler buildings is a famous one. But, doing steel, concrete, composite construction, we've done a lot in the States. It's very quick. It's quick to assemble. It's, easy to do. Out here, the trades don't know it. They're not familiar with it. So you can't afford to bring a whole team in from the States to build this. And the local guys don't want to do it. So all of a sudden their prices are higher to do this construction because they're just not familiar with it. It's risky for them. And so they're like, we'll tell you what, we'll chop this number way down if we can just do it in concrete. And so then, boom, we're back to concrete.
I see.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's that, okay? And then the other is, you talked about misinformation. It's education, but it's also trust. And so, there's a whole new building system. I'm willing to try it, but there's a lot of trust. Will it last? Will it survive a typhoon, And there's that guy down in, was it Telefofo, Inaran area, who is doing homes out of this kind of construction. And his home is beautiful.
Right.
I ran by it once while I was in the middle of construction, stopped saying, this isn't your normal home. And stopped and talked to the guy for a half hour, and he's showing me around what he's doing. So I think in concept it's good, but he's having a hard time selling it because everyone is so scared of previous failures.
Ravda, right. Ravda scared everybody off that guy, right?
And so they're not really wanting to take that risk. And then they're scared, can I sell this to the insurance company? Because if you can't do that, then that's all your risk, and can you risk, 200, 300, $500,000? Yeah.
But it's there, right? If people are willing to take the risk, affordable solutions are there. We spoke with recently with Clark from Smithbridge, and he's doing container housing. Yeah. Right? And then there are people who are advocating for steel, and then there's the composite materials, and a lot of it is just new approaches. So, what do you think? It always goes back to concrete, right? But like, if you could redesign everything here, this is where Brent might not ever answer me, right? But like, how would you design, a place like this, right? Like, would you go like, hey, everything's going to be underground and we're just going to keep the natural beauty? Like, what is something that you would change that you think would be beneficial to Guam in terms of the way we've approached design?
Sure. The concrete solution isn't really a bad solution. It's going to stand, My biggest criticism is when it was done early, it was done easily. And so you had these boxes,
The tropical box.
And that's all we call it. The box, and it wasn't well thought out. You couldn't allow for natural ventilation, so you had to air condition it. So now you're getting locked into a whole process that becomes expensive, right? And so there are a couple of local architects that published a book, and they hand sketched all this stuff, and basically showing how you could build a concrete house with natural ventilation. And it had to do, orientation, where's the wind coming from, do you have shading, that kind of stuff. And it was really a basic in terms of concept. But all those years, nobody's ever dug into it and said, hey, we could do this. There are a couple houses around Island that are still wonderful homes that did this. But then they came back and put in air conditioning because everyone wants air conditioning, So, concrete or not concrete, metal or whatever, it still gets back to we're air conditioning. So, we can ease the time of construction maybe, and maybe we can mix up the building materials maybe. But the bottom line is the overall cost time for construction, and then the operational cost. And the operational cost is how much it's going to cost to run your air conditioning.
Right. There's a house in Santa Rita where all the real estate agents cursed the architect's name because it was detached. There were two components, right? And they didn't connect there's no hallway.
Yes.
So the appraisers look at it as like, how do we value this?
Yes.
This is two separate structures. The zoning's not right. But, in terms of design, it was beautiful.
Yeah, and I know that architect.
Yeah. Oh, you do?
It's a small island. He used to be my boss. But
I didn't realize. I didn't realize, yeah.
No, but and it is a gorgeous house.
Yeah, it's a beautiful house.
But it's very specific. Only a few type of people would be willing to live in it.
Yes, yeah. So, just as an example, some people wouldn't appreciate a Bali style shower. That wasn't in this house, I don't think. But yes, it was. It was a crazy, the Bali, the crazy rain shower.
And he had a fireplace outside.
Right, yeah.
And everyone's like, why would you put a fireplace out here? Well, he's from the States, and to them, a fireplace is not just a generator of heat. It's a center point.
It's
a focal point.
Yeah.
You ground your family. Your family's grounded around what that fireplace is.
Right.
And so, he put it in. He loves it.
Right. And so.
And then he moved.
And
and now you can't sell it.
Yeah, no. But that's a lot of people miss the joy of design, right? That's the joy of working with someone to bring your space to fruition, right?
Yes.
And so whether you're a business or whether you're a single family residence or just that joy of design to bring the way you live into that is really great.
Yeah, and it gets back to your question. What would I do different? Well, how do I put this without sounding horrible? You get what you pay for.
Fair.
Right? And a lot of people, they don't understand the value of good architecture. And so it's easy to go to the guy that's going to give them drawings for this much, and boom, they go and get a permit, it's built, and they're happy, it's fine, But if you get somebody with a little sense of design, understanding of space, all of a sudden the spaces inside work better. It's you walk home and you feel at home. It's a place, a sense of place, or it feels special, or you have a certain area that's your special space. These are all things that are personal to you. And so when as a designer, we bring that out of you, we find out what it is that you really want your home to be, and then we can create that for you. So, but this takes a lot of effort,
right?
And takes somebody with some design style, who can listen and who can respond in a physical space. And so, for example, now I grew up in Southern California, and I toured all the Frank Lloyd Wright houses there because he's really cool. I was an architect.
Yeah, no,
Frank Lloyd Wright. Yeah.
I'm there.
Yeah, and so we went into the one, and it was up in the hills there, and you walked in, and the entry vestibule had a ceiling that was almost scraping my head, and I'm not particularly tall, right? It was that compressed, and I'm like, why would he do this? This is horrible space, And you walk through, and you get through that space, and you go up the stairs, and it opens up to this 2-story volume. He did it for effect,
right?
Yeah. He intentionally compresses you down, right? So when you get to that stairs and it opens up, you go, wow.
You watch Willy Wonka, I think, Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah.
But so one of the reasons that really rings true to me is because I think more thought has to be put into the way people live in terms of housing now, right? You build a big 100-unit subdivision. Well, you should be incorporating some multifamily into that, right? Yeah. You should incorporate some commercial spaces, more walking spaces. And I think that's lost because everyone's trying to monetize and capitalize. But if you build that, it's actually a draw and adds so much value, right? So the value of design, for me, if I was a developer, I'd be focusing on that, really building the community, right? Yeah. Because you see some of the community, like Paris Acres, right, as an example, right? It's a PUD, right? But they incorporated a couple different playgrounds and stuff. You have the pool, and when you go in there with sidewalk, streets, and gutters, it's an older subdivision built in the 70s, but it really feels like a community, right? And there's, and if you leverage that, or even some of the LIHTCs, they have the community center, right? They have the playground, the common spaces. But the problem is it isolates everybody, right? But so now the kind of more modern approach is intermingle, right? Commingle. We have affordable housing mixed in with luxury. So at Tala Verde, we have the ironwood, element, right? And we have multifamily, And so that's something that I think is missing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there was a big push years ago to go more to the old school of, say, downtown design.
Okay.
And so you had your shops, you're right, on the ground floor, retail, upstairs, and maybe a few offices, and above that, it was residential. And so it was like this live, work, play, all in that neighborhood. You never had to leave your neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah. And then came the sprawling subdivisions of homes and completely got away from that. So now you have strip malls because that becomes your gathering point.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you lose that connection. You lose that connection with neighborhood. And for the old school people who grew up knowing all their neighbors, you know, my mom had to go somewhere, the neighbor would watch us, you know, that was normal, you know. And now it's like, I don't know who lives next door to me, and that's kind of sad. Yeah.
You know,
so there's more involved to what you're suggesting because it really ties everyone back into this is a safe place, right? And this is a sense of home and place. And so, yes, I agree there needs to be more of that, but it's really hard to do. Really hard to do.
So when I was at the, I think it was like SAME conference or something, Troy Brown was speaking, right? Captain Troy Brown?
I don't know.
Lieutenant Commander? Yeah,
Sure.
Commander Troy.
Admiral,
yeah. The gentleman in charge of, construction here for the military. He said he identified about $6 billion in construction capacity, and we're at about right a little over $2 billion, right?
Yeah.
So there's plenty of capacity here, right? So with that in mind, what are some of the challenges that you see in terms of getting this aircraft carrier built and mobilized and fully entrenched to defend, the tip of the spear?
It's getting material to the island.
Okay.
Right. Back in 2009, when they projected this great buildup, right, and they talked about the numbers, right, we went back and looked at the capacity of the port, and the port did not have nearly the capacity needed just to move the product from ship to ground.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. And so immediately it was a problem. Well, it didn't happen. They kind of downsized the whole deal. But now we're starting to ratchet it back up to, how much growth they want to do in the next couple of years. And it's getting pretty high again. So it's really getting material on island. Locally, there's not much here we can use without hurting ourselves in the future.
Okay.
People are quarrying for aggregate, right? There's certain areas nobody cares, but there's a lot of quarries around island that are just there. Nothing's growing back. It's just rock and it's just there. And I'm concerned this is going to be an issue. We can't keep digging our island, digging it up to build something, right? And so I think this is a limited material or resource. Yeah. But all the concrete has to come in, all the glass, all the steel, all the waterproofing, paints, windows, doors, all this has to come in from somewhere else. The federal government, under the previous administration, set back the requirements for U.S.-based materials for certain agencies. Doesn't include Department of Defense.
Okay.
But so certain agencies, they can buy from China. They can buy from Korea now. It's not have to be U.S. made.
Okay.
And so, and they looked at Guam and said, you're way out there. It doesn't make sense to make you ship it all the way from here when you have a whole resource over there. And a lot of the products you can justify as being as high quality or maybe higher.
Okay.
So part of the federal government's already figured that out. DOD has not yet because political reasons, I'm sure. But that's where all the buildup is really going to come from, is on the DOD side. So it's restrictive. That's the hard part, and that's what's driving up cost of construction. Okay, you want to build a home,
right?
It's not that big a deal, right? It's not a big home. It's and
we have the capacity,
it's a nice home,
right?
And it's a beautiful home, right? And in theory, we have capacity, we have the workers and all that. You can't afford to build it, right? because the cost of getting all the material here is just too high, and it's too competitive. There's too much demand for it, and so everything just keeps ratcheting the price up. So can we build homes cheaper? Can we build them quicker? Yes. But can we get the materials to build it any quicker than we're doing now? Not for a while. And so your prices aren't going to go down.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's generally once prices go up, they don't generally come down, right? Just like gas
Yes and no. Contractors cost, to do the work, right? If there's a lot of work, their rates go up.
Yes.
I mean,
supply and demand.
yeah,
right?
yeah. If you want me to work on it, you're going to pay, and there's nobody else going to do it, you're going to want me to work on it, right? So, they can do that, right?
Yes.
When there's not a lot of work going on, they're very competitive. Go figure this out, and their pencil gets a little bit sharper, right? And they're doing more for less money. So that is always market driven.
Yes.
Right. And that's not something that goes up and just keeps going up. Okay. We're stuck with insurance. Okay. And insurance isn't going any cheaper. And so insurance is always going. Well, that means bonds are, bonding for material, bonding for work. That's going to keep growing to be more expensive. So some of this we have no control over, and it isn't going to get any cheaper, right? But materials, once the world demand for some of this goes down, then it becomes more competitive, and the materials do actually get cheaper. Yeah.
Well, what about, as an example, right, you say 3D printing before. Right?
Yeah.
One of the things they want to do with 3D printing to make it more sustainable is to reuse the aggregate, chip it up, right, remove the rebar.
Concrete.
Right?
Yeah,
Yes.
using concrete.
Right.
Yes.
So use the existing concrete, chipping it down, and reusing it as aggregate. Do you think that's a viable approach?
I think, UOG's been doing some studies on it. Actually, they've been doing tests. And I think in theory, they found it actually is possible. There are some caveats to some concerns on the material itself and how it performs as new material. But it's not that far off. In theory, it is possible. The problem is chipping concrete to get rebar out is an expensive process. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's a lot of labor, right? And you got machines that can tear things apart, but to really separate it all up, it's a lot of work. So cost-wise, it's still more economical to bring in new material and build it than try to use this material.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, that makes sense. But and so just even like your hay bale example, right? I think part of it is they've introduced biomaterial, to help with the monolithic hardening of the 3D printing, and then, like they mirror current building standards. But in your experience, has any of the contractors that you've worked with here, the large contractors, envision a project using kind of like high-end technology or say, like, as an example, why aren't people using composite rebar here, right? You would think it's lighter, right? You won't have the spalling, right? And so shipping wouldn't be an issue. Why isn't that being incorporated more into design locally? Why do you think?
I don't know about the composite rebar. I know there's a reluctance on the engineering side, so I'm not sure of the details of that. I know we've looked at, what do we have abundance here that we can use? Somebody said, well, what about glass?
Okay.
Sand. Can we use glass? Because if you grind down glass, it's sand, right? In theory, yeah. And so digging into the research, and it's really a big question mark.
I see.
Because you got these guys looking at it saying, well, the glass is good up to this point, and then it fails. And the guys going, well, yeah, that's not really accurate. We did this test and we got this, and it actually performed better. And so there's there's no consensus on the performance of glass as a building material. Okay, so back up a little bit. Can we use it as base for roads? Well, the feds have been blessing that for years. The state of New York or city of New York, they have their own highway testing. They've been using it for decades as a base material. So there are uses for some of this stuff that maybe not for your house, but maybe we can use it under roads, and we can reduce that use, the amount of base used, by using glass.
Okay.
So I think we just think more out of the box. We have this material. Well, how can we use it and put it in such a way that we don't need to rely on bringing more material in, or using that material for something else that we could really use it for.
Understood. And so, like, in this conversation, I understand some of the realities, right? So there are a lot of technologies out there that are viable, but we don't necessarily have the local expertise to execute, right?
Well, that, and again, it's really getting the material to prove itself, right? UOG's been pushing the circular economy, right? And it's a great concept, and so they're looking at plastics.
Okay.
And so if they get a grant, can they buy this machine that's going to compress plastics, and we can make building blocks out of them, Legos,
yes,
so to
yes,
speak,
yes.
And so looking at that, is it possible? Well, in theory it is, but will people buy it?
And is it viable?
And maybe it just ends up, it's great for building small retaining walls in your yard, and, and you use that CMU for buildings, So again, can we use waste effectively, which would be great, and not, because not this pile of plastic bottles that we have, and not shipping it off to be dumped somewhere else, right? Can we do that? That'd be great. But I think these people are really trying hard to find ways to use this material, and I think that's great. And we just keep encouraging them and find ways and test the material and make sure it works, and then we can do more with it. So I think there is potential. I think we're getting to the point where it's more important to do this, and I think that's better.
Well, what do you think has the potential to be the biggest disruptor in the local construction industry in the next, say, 5 years?
The biggest disruptor, other than what we have now? Well,
like a technology being introduced, or like a methodology, or like a practice. Do you have any insight on that?
No, I'm thinking more outside forces.
Okay.
And that would be, typhoons really set us back. We have to stop, we have to rebuild, we have to fix what we have, and it sets us back. World politics, U.S. politics, who knows what's going to happen,
Yes.
And there's a lot of concern because there's a lot of, Guam gets a lot of grant money, and it's from Department of Interior, Department of Energy, Department of Transportation, Department of Agriculture. They're funding a lot of projects out here, and it's been great. UOGs, they're building buildings because they got money. They're working with the Department of Agriculture to get money, And so this is great. It's been a real benefit for us, and we're doing positive things with this money. Now everyone's panicked that everything's shutting off, everything's on pause, and we don't know if we're going to get those grants anymore. And so,
Doge.
yeah. So boom,
Doge again.
Things may really slow down here.
Yeah.
Other than the military, because we're not getting that funding anymore. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, so if you could do one project locally, like what do you think would be fun for you to do? Like what would be your passion project? If you had if you were like Brent Wiese, billionaire, right? and now you're altruistic, and I'm gonna do something to benefit Guam. What would you love to do?
This is gonna sound strange. I would buy property.
Okay.
And use it to preserve the natural resources that we have. And so it can't be bought, it can't be developed, which is, I'm an architect, what am I thinking,
Did you say your emphasis in landscape, right? So you're
what kind of crazy man am I? No, but I see, Southern Mountain, there's access. Some of that property is reserved property. You can't build. But there's a lot of private property around that. And the families there have been great. It's minimal development. They're really keeping it pristine, and they're keeping it clean. And they're allowing, the boonie stompers and the hikers access to it because they want to share the property because they know it's just beautiful property.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, but little by little, it's eroding away. So it's getting harder to get up to Southern Mountain, the ridge, because there's development, and they're like, no, you can't go through my property now. I built this house. I don't want you going around, and maybe for good reasons. People have been littering, I don't know, or the noise, I don't know. But so it would be nice to buy property to maintain the easy access to these really beautiful spots that Guam has.
No, but that's kind of trendy too, right? So you see like the guy from Netflix, he bought a mountaintop, right? So he bought a ski resort, and so like and all these celebrities are buying like portions of Yellowstone, but the deal is they have to maintain the acreage, right? Yeah. So, but the argument to that is like, well, you're not letting everybody else in. That's the point, just like you said, right?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, what about the rest of us?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. No, it has to be open to everybody. Yeah. Everyone has to be able to climb up to the Southern Mountain Ridge. Yeah.
But I do love that because again, that's the idea of design, right? Like part of the problem with Guam, or maybe like one of the reasons why it's a particular kind of place is because everything was kind of laid out a little bit haphazardly to a degree. Yeah. And part of that, there's nuance to that too, because it's familial ownership, there's the ties, there's the historical ties to the land and respect for that, right? Yeah. So I appreciate that. And the idea that, like in Hawaii, there's a lot of discussion about alienation from the land because of gentrification and because of the way. And so it's a very sensitive topic, but to be able to preserve that, right, is really nice. And, I think Saipan does a really good job of that too, incorporating that beautification aspect. Yeah. And I do think that's missing here. So I think that's really insightful.
Yeah, Saipan's a beautiful island. Really impressed with Saipan. And they spent a lot of time making this simple project a little bit nicer, a little more pedestrian friendly.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, they have that area along the beach that was really nothing for years. And they said, well, we have to do this to repair this and that. Why don't we add a sidewalk and let the skaters, whatever, the bike riders and the walkers and the joggers. And all of a sudden, everyone loves it. It's part of the fabric now, Right. So a little more effort, a little more care, and there's a price to it, but it comes back not in dollars, but just everyone's invested in this space now. Right. Everyone has a.
It comes back. It comes back in community.
Into it.
And you're invested, and it multiplies, right? It's a force multiplier in terms of effect. So it's really great, and that's really insightful. So thank you for that. Sure. And that's one of the things that we do, right? One of the things we do is at Pinpoint is we lead with data. And one of the things we look at is traffic patterns, where people go, where they come from, where they work. And we try and provide that insight to our development partners so they can build those types of communities that are lasting, durable, and are the envy of everybody.
Yeah. So, well, and it makes sense because, I was just talking to somebody and they're complaining about, I live in Jigo, but I got to come all the way down to Tamuning every day, right? And so this gets back to live, work, play.
Right.
Relationships, if you don't have to make that trip every morning and fight the traffic, you're going to be happier.
Yeah, for sure.
She's got to leave an hour earlier to get to work. Okay, right. Well, that's an hour saved with family or friends or eating or sleeping in a little bit longer maybe, Yeah. And so, but then it's also less traffic. So win-win. Yeah. So there's a lot of these things that benefit us in many more ways than I think people are really accounting for.
Right, and again, the way that we grew up is in neighborhoods, right? And our parents weren't afraid to let us out and like wander the street and come home when it's dark. Right?
That's right.
But that doesn't exist now, and that's our fault because we don't create those communities. And that's what we need to do moving forward.
And we have to protect.
Yes, absolutely.
And now we're afraid.
Yes. Yeah. So let's not be afraid anymore.
Let's not be afraid.
But Brent, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, great insight. Pleasure being able to sit down with you, and I look forward to having future conversations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Brent for joining us today and giving us all those valuable insights about the local building and real estate industry. When someone's been in the industry for over 25 years and they have something to say, I think you should stop and listen. And Brent has a lot of great ideas, and he has a lot of practical knowledge about the real estate industry. And that's something, sometimes, I tend to forget that sometimes the most traditional approach is the best approach, but sometimes everybody else forgets that sometimes you have to ask why. So it's important that we continue to have these conversations and ask why. And that's why we do it. So you know why, and you can action your investments. For more information like that, And for more ideas about real estate and the construction industry, please like, subscribe, share, and join us, and look to the show notes for more information. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time.